When 20-year-old Precious misses church service to meet an online friend who promised her a new iPhone, her day turns into a scary nightmare. This story shows the risks of making friends on the internet and trusting strangers too quickly. Follow this touching story and please, like, share and subscribe. Precious was a 20-year-old girl living in Lagos. She lived in a small apartment with her mother, who worked hard as a nurse to provide for them. They were not poor, but things were difficult enough to make them pray day and night for God to send them an helper. Precious had been a bright and hard-working girl with big dreams of becoming a nurse like her mother. She was a curious student, and that made her live more on social media than real life. She was always online, posting pictures on Instagram, videos on TikTok, and updates on Facebook. Despite the challenges, Precious was happy. She had a loving boyfriend named Chike, who was studying engineering in Law Tech. Their relationship was a serious one, full of dreams and promises of a future together. But something shocking happened. Precious found out she was 2 weeks pregnant. Her pregnancy wasn't just a personal matter, it was also a big challenge. She knew her church-going mother would scold her for having premarital sex. Her mother would also worry about her finishing school and the stigma of being a single mother in their community. She was also worried about how they would financially cater for the child since they were already struggling to make ends meet. She believed in the strength of her dreams and the love she and Chike shared, but all these obstacles made her keep silent about the pregnancy. One day, she got a message from an Instagram user called Emeka. In the message, Emeka had described how he saw her profile, liked her pictures, and wanted to be her friend. That kind of message wasn't strange to her. She got hundreds of such messages every week, but this particular one stood out because it came from an account with a blue tick, showing that the user was verified. She checked Emeka's profile and saw his pictures. Emeka's profile portrayed him as a cute guy with a nice car and a fine apartment. She thought to herself, it won't be bad to have him as a friend. So, later that day, she responded to Emeka's message, and that was how their friendship began. However, it was clear from their chats that Emeka wanted more than friendship. He was always steering their conversations towards sexual topics, and she always reminded him that she wasn't interested in anything beyond casual friendship. One day, Precious and Emeka were playing a game of truth or dare, and Precious seized the opportunity to dare Emeka to buy her a new phone as her old one was barely working, making it hard to keep up with her studies. Moreover, Emeka seemed like he could afford it. Emeka did not argue. In fact, he promised to buy Precious a brand new iPhone 13 Pro Max, but on the condition that she would visit him in his apartment. "Why must I come to your apartment before you can buy me a phone?" she had asked. "How am I even sure that you're serious about buying the phone for me?" She pressed further. Emeka responded with a laughing emoji. He told her to relax, that he was not trying to play a trick on her. "The phone store where I will buy the phone for you is close to my estate, and I want us to go together so you can choose the color you want before I make payment," he said. His response made Precious feel at ease. But she knew that her mum would never allow her to visit a boy in his private apartment. So, she planned to go on a Sunday after her mother had left very early for church service. As she prepared to leave that Sunday morning, she felt guilty for lying to her mother about where she was going. She had lied that she needed to branch at her friend's house to get a course material she needed for school. She told her she would join her in church in time for Sunday school. With a reassuring smile, her mother had wished her good luck with her studies, unaware of the true plan. Precious navigated the bustling Lagos streets, taking a bus towards the mainland where Emeka lived. As the bus sped along the road, she thought about her decision. She had only known Emeka for a few weeks, but from their conversations, he seemed like a nice guy and someone she could trust. When she finally arrived at his neighborhood, she felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She walked down the busy street, passing small shops and street vendors until she reached his apartment building. It was an old structure, painted a once bright yellow that had faded over the years. Emeka greeted her at the door with a big smile. "Precious, so good to finally meet you," he exclaimed, leading her into his apartment. He was a tall, well-dressed 25-year-old man with a confident air about him. As they sat down in his living room, he began talking about his business ventures and asking about her studies. At first, the conversation was pleasant. Emeka seemed genuinely interested in her life and her plans for the future. But as time passed, Precious started to feel uncomfortable. Emeka's questions became more personal, and his looks lingered a little too long. She reminded herself that she was there for the phone and that it was important for her studies and keeping in touch with Chike. As they continued talking, Emeka shifted the conversation towards sexual topics. He complimented Precious on her looks and asked if her boyfriend was not cheating on her or misbehaving. Precious answered politely but firmly, making it clear that she was in a committed relationship and expecting a child with her boyfriend. Emeka seemed to back off a bit, but only for a moment. He then offered her a tour of his apartment, which she reluctantly accepted, hoping it would steer the conversation away from sex. As they walked through the small apartment, Emeka suddenly stepped closer to her, trying to touch her arm. Precious stepped back immediately, her heart racing. "Emeka, I don't think you understand. I'm here just as a friend, and I need to be clear that nothing else can happen between us," she said sternly. Emeka paused, looking at her with a surprised expression. Then he smiled, a bit too smoothly. "Of course, Precious. I respect that. Let's just have some lunch, and we'll go by the phone." Feeling uneasy, Precious declined the offer for lunch, stating she wasn't hungry. She wanted to keep the situation under control and not give Emeka any wrong signals. But she also felt trapped, unsure how to leave politely without the phone, as it was promised as a gift. Emeka seemed to accept her refusal to eat, but he insisted on at least offering her some drinks. He went to the kitchen and came back with a bottle of soda and a glass of water. Precious watched carefully as he poured the drinks. Her suspicion and the general warnings she had always heard about being cautious around new people made her wary of accepting anything. "I really appreciate it, Emeka, but I think I should be going soon. I still have to get to church," she said, trying to find a way to leave without escalating the situation. Emeka looked disappointed but nodded. "Okay, but at least drink some water before you go. It's hot today, and you've come a long way," he said, pushing a glass of water towards her. Precious considered it for a moment. Water seemed harmless, and she was indeed thirsty after the long journey. She took the glass, watching Emeka's expression as she sipped. He smiled at her, his gaze lingering a bit too long as if he was undressing her with his eyes, making her feel uncomfortable again. As she drank the water, something felt off. The taste was slightly bitter, not like plain water should taste. Precious's heart sank as she realized something might be wrong. She looked up at Emeka, who was watching her with an intense gaze. "What did you put in the water?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Emeka's expression changed, and he moved closer. "It's just a little something to relax you," he said, his tone too casual. Panic surged through Precious. She knew she had to act fast. She pulled out her phone and pretended to check a message. Quickly, she typed out her location and a brief explanation of what was happening, sending it to her mother and some of her friends. She hoped one of them would read the message in time, understand the urgency, and act quickly. Emeka noticed her on the phone and frowned. "Who are you texting?" he asked, his tone now edgy. "Just my mom, telling her I'll be home soon," Precious replied, trying to sound calm. She stood up, saying she needed to use the restroom, using the moment to distance herself from Emeka. As she locked herself in the bathroom, she felt dizzy and scared. She leaned against the door, hoping help would arrive soon. Outside, she could hear Emeka pacing, his footsteps heavy and anxious. Precious held her phone tightly, praying that her mother would get the message in time. As her vision blurred, she whispered a prayer for herself and her unborn child, hoping against hope that they would be saved. She felt her head spinning as the substance in her drink took effect. She knew she couldn't wait long if she was going to escape. Her phone vibrated quietly. Her mother had seen the message and was calling. With trembling hands, Precious answered, whispering, "Mum, please hurry. Something's wrong. I sent you the location." Her mother's voice was frantic. "I'm coming, Precious. Just hang on. I'm calling the police too." The call dropped as Precious's grip on the phone weakened. She slid down to the floor, trying to maintain consciousness, her mind racing for ways to protect herself and her baby. Outside, Emeka was knocking on the bathroom door, his voice alternating between threats and commanding her to come out. Precious didn't respond, pretending she couldn't hear him with the hope that it would buy her some time. Precious's mother, Ada, had already left church in a state of panic. After ending the call, she had immediately dialed the police, explaining the urgency of the situation. She then found a church member with a bike to drive her to the location Precious sent to her. As they sped to rescue Precious, she called a few relatives and friends who lived nearby, asking them to head towards Emeka's address immediately. Ada's bike sped through the streets of Lagos, her mind overwhelmed with worry for her daughter. She prayed silently, hoping she would make it in time. Traffic was mercifully light, allowing her to make good time, but every second felt like an eternity. As they neared the address, she saw Precious's friends and a few family members gathering outside the apartment building. The police arrived almost at the same time, and together, they approached Emeka's apartment. The front door was locked, and there was no response from inside. It was obvious that Emeka had fled the apartment when he noticed that Precious had become unresponsive. The officers wasted no time. They broke down the door and entered, guns drawn, calling out for Precious. Ada followed closely behind, her heart in her throat. The apartment was silent except for the sound of their footsteps. They searched room by room until they reached the bathroom door, which was also locked from inside. "Police, open up," one officer shouted. There was no response. The tension was palpable as they prepared to break down the bathroom door. After several attempts, they forced the door open. Ada rushed in first, only to find Precious unconscious on the floor, her phone clutched in her hand. Ada screamed her daughter's name, shaking her gently, but Precious was unresponsive. The officers called for medical help, but couldn't get any nearby hospitals to respond. Being a nurse, Ada tried to resuscitate Precious by performing CPR, but nothing worked. Precious just laid there, lifeless with her eyes wide open. Ada begged the officers to take Precious in their patrol vehicle to the hospital. At this point, she was panicking, jumping all over the place, and acting very strangely. The officers lifted Precious and rushed her to their vehicle. She was rushed into the emergency ward of a nearby hospital where she was pronounced dead on arrival at the hospital. The doctors scanned her tummy and discovered that she was pregnant. When Ada heard the news, she lost her mind. She couldn't believe that Precious would get pregnant and keep it a secret from her. "Doctor, please, can we at least rescue the baby?" she asked. "I'm sorry, we couldn't detect a pulse from the baby. We've lost the mother and her baby." The doctor replied. "Jesus. Why me? My daughter is gone." Ada cried sorrowfully as her relatives and Precious friends gathered round her to console her. The news of Precious's passing spread quickly through the community. Precious was well liked, and her story touched many hearts. Friends, neighbors, and family members gathered at the hospital. It took weeks of non-stop investigation and surveillance, but Emeka was finally arrested at his friend's apartment. The police took him into custody, and he was charged with murder. However, Precious and her baby had been long gone at that point. Everybody felt outraged about the incident, but it served as a lesson to other young ladies to be careful when visiting random friends they meet on social media. As you reflect on Precious's story, let it be a reminder of the importance of vigilance in safeguarding our well-being. Her story is not just a tale of loss but a call to action for awareness, to prevent such heartbreaking outcomes from recurring. As you navigate your digital interactions, remember Precious's story. Let it guide you to make safer choices, to protect not just yourself but also your loved ones who might be affected by these decisions. Please share this story, discuss it, and let it serve as a warning to be more careful online.